You need destroyers occasionally, but destroyers don't build. Destroyers don't have an idea of how to create something. My grandfather used to always say that, it takes you 20 years to become a carpenter. Anyone can tear down a house. Any idiot with a hammer can break something. But it takes you 20 years to be a carpenter, a skilled craftsman, someone who knows how to build a house that isn't going to fall over. And what's happened is we've, as a society, been fed all of this, government's bad and everything should be in the private sector's hands. And, government's just in your way and we need to get rid of them. And we need people who are going to stop and restrain and constrict and all of that. Drag government into the bathtub and drown it in the bathtub. We've been told that for so long that we elect people who say, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure your roads are crumbling and your bridges are falling down. We're going to make sure that your schools are crummy. We're going to make sure that just so that we can have a very wealthy billionaire class. That to me is utterly incredible. But that's what we've got. We don't have statesmen anymore. There aren't people who know how to navigate the system. And look, at the end of the day, one side or the other cannot have dictatorial control. One or the other side cannot have absolute power to crush the other side. The beauty of this country is that the minority has rights. That it's not about mob rule, that we don't have these wild pendulum swings from one side to the other of really just obscene extremes. We've kind of walked along the middle of the path. And I would like to somehow get back to that because, look, at the end of the day, beating each other over the head with hammers only gets us sore heads. We don't actually end up with any better off. And it starts with you and me. It starts with us saying no more destroyers. We need builders. We need people who understand how you work together and how we move forward and want to work together and want to move forward. And that's the key. I've been watching some of these Republicans on TV coming out and, it's all about destroying things, all about, here's one of the bizarre things. The one congressman was asked, about the Trump investigation. And the first words out of his mouth was, but Obama. I'm going, no, that wasn't what you were asked. But Obama, but Clinton. No. You were asked about Trump. Answer the question. And we've allowed these politicians to get away with this stuff for so long that it just becomes a reflex to them. They're never going to answer our questions unless we make them. That simple. Anyway, lots to get to today. Lots on the agenda. Looking forward to a good Friday. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. When we come back, Sarah Kendzior is going to be here to talk about, Russia, the insanity, the low bar, the whole 9 yards. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
All of my life I've searched for clarity. I have wrestled with two paths buried deep inside of me. I lost some rounds, been knocked around, felt my share of defeat. Yet somehow I've always managed to get back on my feet.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that black author and Marxist theorist C.L.R. James passed away. James was born in Trinidad, at the time a Caribbean colony that was part of the British Empire. His father was a school teacher. James became a leading intellectual on the subject of black liberation. His most famous work, The Black Jacobins, tells the story of the 1791 Haitian Revolution, when enslaved black Haitians successfully overthrew French colonial rule. James was a frequent contributor to Labor Action, a Marxist journal produced in New York from 1940 to 1958. He wrote about the struggles of black workers. He often penned fiery language. For example, in 1941, James wrote an article imploring black workers not to cross the picket line during a strike against the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Ford had a reputation of hiring black workers at a time when many employers discriminated in their employment practices. But James warned his readers that the Ford company was no friend to the worker and that the company was attempting to use race to keep its workforce divided. James wrote, quote, "Ford is one of the most dangerous enemies of labor who exist in this country. This enemy of society has been laying a train of race hatred in Detroit and is now about to touch it off. The organized working class movement and the Negroes will have to fight hard and long to check and frustrate and defeat this sinister plot. This will be no easy fight." In other articles, James also used his pen to call out labor unions for not including black workers and to call for the unification of black and white workers in their struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Come on, ya good workers, good news to you I'll tell of how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So the Donald, like I said, heading overseas. First trip abroad. You know, I hope he brought his big boy pants. Here's my fear. I mean, the bar is so low. I mean, this is one of those bars where George W. Bush is going, wow, that's low. I guess just if he reads off the teleprompter, stays on script, doesn't start World War III or the next Crusades, it's going to be viewed as just a major rousing success. And you'll have Van Jones on CNN saying, no, he's presidential and, you know, all of that nonsense. But I'm still waiting for the big speech on Islam. Still think it should be on pay-per-view. Anyway, we're going to talk about this, that, the other stuff, all the Russia stuff that keeps piling on. I've asked our good friend Sarah Kendzior to come talk with us. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So what do you think? The big trip abroad, is this going to help him?
I don't think anything can help him. I mean, what's more important is, you know, is it going to help us, the American public? Is it going to help our country? Is it going to help our standing internationally? And, you know, I think the answer is a resounding no.
But, you know, there are some who are framing this as, you know, this is Trump's opportunity to, well, Trump Obama when he went first time abroad.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of look at comparisons between Trump's trip and previous trips. You know, one notable thing is that most presidents start off by visiting our immediate neighbors of Canada and Mexico, which, of course, Trump can't because he's alienated and insulted them. And, you know, I mean, who gets in a fight with Canada? Now we have the answer. And so, you know, what he's going to do, I think, is go on a scripted journey to countries who he doesn't understand beyond how they serve his personal business interests. And I think the, you know, possibility and potential for gaffes and, you know, errors is extremely high. He tends to go off script. He needs to be the center of attention. He can't focus on a document unless his name is in it. So I think, you know, at best we'll get some inadvertent comedy, but, you know, on a more serious note, I think he has the potential to damage a lot of our international relations.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the sad reality is, and you look at that, reports are already coming out that the various places that he's going, they're shortening meetings specifically for him because, you know, a lot of these, when you go abroad and you have these meetings with, you know, different dignitaries, and the meetings are forever. Evidently, they've shortened them down into, well, more digestible time frames for Donald.
It's pathetic. I mean, any parent who's traveled with a small child on an international flight probably feels like this is very familiar, where you have to figure out how to entertain the child on the plane and keep him from destroying things and keep him from, messing up your meetings and business engagements abroad, and basically make sure the child has a babysitter or an adult with them at all times so that they don't cause problems. That's how Trump is being treated, like he's 3 years old, and he's the president of the United States. So that's extremely disturbing.
That's so right, spot on, and sad. I mean, but here's the thing, and I look at, and I actually know a couple of Trump supporters who are still on the Trump bandwagon, and you look at the people who still are, and I'm still scratching my head of how, after all that we've seen, after all of the scandal, all of the news, the stuff that's come out, especially the fact that evidently Michael Flynn told them he was under investigation and they still appointed him National Security Advisor. All of this incompetence and hubris and, insanity. How can you still support this guy?
It's pathetic. I was just on a panel in Estonia at the Leonard Mary conference with two Trump supporters who, contrary to the cliche, are, very wealthy, powerful, older white men, one from the Heritage Foundation, one is the vice president of Ford. And their defense of Trump was basically, that we needed to be empathetic towards him because he's so unprepared and he's so incompetent. And when they weren't saying that, they were outright lying, saying that there had been no chaos since he'd been elected, that he had a coherent geopolitical strategy. And so, their way of supporting him is either just a denial of what's going on. Of course, as this was happening, there were a lot of revelations involving Russia and Trump giving, state secrets to Russia in the White House. And, on the other hand, is this sort of attitude again, like he's some sort of little child that we need to show patience and understanding with, whereas in reality, he's the 70-year-old commander-in-chief, and we can't afford to have somebody.
Yeah, it's just absolutely
shows a mixture of incompetence and malice. I don't think you necessarily need to choose, but both of those are absolutely terrible qualities to have in a president and a commander in chief. They're dangerous qualities, and they put our country at danger.
Yeah, you said earlier that most presidents, they start off with their neighbors. Someone sent me a post that said Mexico wasn't going to pay for the wall, but they'll be happy to pay for the impeachment.
I bet they will. I mean, I can't blame them at all. I feel like there's international solidarity brewing among citizens, who have to deal with Trump, and also with a lot of, other very unfortunate leaders that have risen within the last couple of years that are of a similar authoritarian bent, and and who he embraces. People in Turkey, people in Russia, they're also suffering under leaders of this nature. I mean, their problems, I would say, are worse than ours, but it's a similar level of frustration where you're just wondering, when is this person who has no interest in serving the public going to be out?
I've been saying maybe there's a silver lining in all of this. That maybe as a society we wake up and realize that being president is not easy. I know Trump ran around and said basically any idiot can do it, and I'm going, well, evidently not any idiot. But is it possible that maybe there's something positive to where we go, this actually, we need qualified people and we all need to be involved, and there might be, maybe he is the great uniter. He's the guy who brings us somewhere back out together.
I mean, if he's going to unite us around the fact that, don't drop nukes on countries or don't take away all of our civil and voting rights, we may be united at a point already done. And, that's my concern. I definitely think people have a greater appreciation of their rights and of their sovereignty, and much more of a commitment to civic engagement and to protecting those rights. But, the damage he's done is enormous. Even if he were to be removed from office soon, we would still have to deal, with everything that's transpired and with, the general wreckage of our political institutions, which, were not in great shape before he came into office. It's part of the way he got there. So we have a lot of work to do. And I'm also not sure that people do see clearly, because everyone wants so badly for things to just magically revert to normal. As you were mentioning before with Van Jones, you have all these pundits that at the first chance they get, they deem him presidential. You have the New York Times soliciting, sycophantic op-eds from readers about why Trump is great, as this is going on, as this investigation of, espionage and treason is going on. So to me, it seems like people aren't learning important lessons. They're full of hope. They're understandably, worried and panicked. I think that's normal, but I'm not sure pragmatically everybody is really grasping how much work we have to do to rebuild our country to recover from this if we do have that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I look at just the appointment of just putting Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court is enough damage for a generation or two. But at some point, when do we take all of these stories? Because look, I mean, leaking secrets to Russian spies, the timeline on the firing of Comey. I mean, you can just go down the list, all of the the ties with the Russians. You go down the list. At what point do we, as a society, go, you're right. Maybe there is a crisis going on? Because honestly, I mean, I talk to people all the time who they just seem to be living their lives.
I mean, people can live their lives, on a local level with this happening at an executive level. I think without it, necessarily directly affecting them. I think that's why you see people more likely to rise up when it comes to something like healthcare or public education, like something that they're immediately going to lose. But, I'm hoping that the March for Truth on June 3rd is going to, maybe create a greater sense of awareness that, yes, this does affect our daily lives in the same way going to war affects your daily life, even if you're not a soldier or enlisted, the direction that your country is headed is going to have repercussions, politically, financially, in terms of how we feel about our nation, in terms of the strength of our institutions. And the last week alone is so full of things that, just one of these things would have been the major defining scandal of another presidency, firing Comey, inviting Lavrov to the White House and telling them secrets, bringing in the Russian media, but not the U.S. media, and then everything that happened, like a couple of days ago, I was on a 10-hour flight, and there was like a year's worth of news bombshells dropped during that flight, so I'm still trying to catch up. And so, yes, of course, this is a crisis, and I think that the pace of it is so fast that people understandably have difficulty processing it, and so maybe want to shut it out. But that's the opposite, I think, as responsible citizens of what we need to be doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of their strategy. Chaos being the new normal, to where people just throw up their hands and go, "I can't keep up. I'll go, walk in the daisies."
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and among citizens, I think there's also, I'm seeing more and more of these false posts about, upcoming indictments and things like that. Every week there's somebody saying, oh, it's coming, it's going to end. And I think the longing for it to end is kind of outweighing the reality of the situation. It's making people passive. And that's dangerous too, because there are a lot of rights that this administration, not just Trump, but the administration as a whole and the GOP are trying to take away. There's already new initiatives that are going to take away voting rights. And so we need to be on the ball and not just sort of sit back and assume, that the IC is going to handle everything, or the FBI, or whoever is investigating it. We need to make sure we, as the public, hold people accountable and put pressure on our elected officials to do their job to hold the administration accountable as well.
Now, what do you think of Robert Mueller? What do you think of the appointment of a special prosecutor?
Well, I think first of all, it's not enough to have a special prosecutor, because first, this can be dragged out for a very long time through a special prosecutor, and the amount of damage that Trump can do, both domestically and internationally, can be enormous and perhaps irreparable during that time. That said, from what I understand, he is a good choice. People whose judgment I trust, have recommended him, and I certainly think he's, not somebody who's in it to support Trump or some sort of inside lackey. But I think that we need, a nonpartisan independent commission, which I've been saying since, November of last year, that we urgently need this to happen. I think we need the pace to be up a little bit. We've already seen what happened, with Comey being fired and how that can derail the pace of this investigation. And I think Mueller is, from what I understand, not able to be fired, which is good. But the fact that that even has to come into play as something that's necessary, because we have to function under the assumption that the president is going to fire everybody who's investigating him for crimes. I mean, that's a very, very bad place for a country to be in. So, I think we need more than just Mueller holding this down.
But Sarah, he wasn't really asking Comey to stop the investigation. He had just said he had hoped that he would.
Yeah, I mean, what he did was one of the most blatantly autocratic moves of his entire, tenure in office, which is really saying something because he's done so much. And we're at a point where the investigated can fire the investigator, and he has no scruples about it. I think to some extent, parts of the media and certainly parts of the GOP allow him to get away with it. I think this is so vast that there's a large number of people implicated. Everyone who was working on the Trump campaign team and, most of the people in the administration, I think, were aware of a lot of these misdeeds or actively participating in them. And so it's in their interest, to try to shut this thing down. And if Trump is going to blatantly shut this thing down through what I see as an act of corruption in firing Comey, they're not going to protest. So it's, again, it's really on people and on officials who are, doing their job and are serving the public to make sure that this is handled with integrity.
Yeah, I keep hearing stories coming out of D.C. though that some of the aides are talking, and they're lawyering up, and there's a whole bunch of worry that there's big debts, and there's a bunch of people jumping ship, looking to jump ship. It looks like the mutiny, from what I'm hearing, is happening, and I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think if there's a time for that to happen, it would be now, both because, as I've been saying for a long time, no one's loyalty to Trump is rewarded. It never has been. You can look at his whole history of business deals, and he screws over absolutely everybody he comes in contact with, and, they leave the worse for it, which is why it's amazing that so many people did not figure this out, because it's not like he was some reclusive figure doing this secretly. Like, he did this publicly. His tagline for his TV show was "You're fired." You could kind of get a sense that there's a streak of sadism here, and he exalts in having power in whatever capacity, whether in business, whether in entertainment, and whether in politics, and he wants to abuse that power. And I think, there is a sense to some degree right now that this is a sinking ship, that this is an administration that, if it's ousted, will go down as possibly treasonous. I think most people don't want to be associated with that. You have to remember that Trump has bounced back or been brought back from the brink so many times. I mean, there were so many times during the primary, during the election, after the election, where people were like, that's it, this is the last straw, he's finished. And, right now I would say we're at the most serious, crimes and offenses that we've seen. I think giving, state secrets to Russia, ones that endanger people's lives, like you really can't. I think you can't top that. I'm sure he'll find a way to do so. But yeah, this would definitely be a good time to bail. At the same time, I'm not confident that he'll actually be prosecuted for any of this, even though it is so blatant and obvious, and it's clear to me that he should be.
So you don't think there's going to be an impeachment or any of that? You think this goes away?
I don't think it'll ever go away. I think that people will always be looking for the truth. They'll look for what happened. I think we have a number of representatives and other public officials who are committed to finding out, what has transpired, not just because of Trump as an individual, but because this affects, our elections, our sovereignty, our foreign policy, our national security, all these issues. You can't just lay back and let this go. What I could see happening is, for example, an investigation takes place and Trump is found guilty of, collusion, for example, or, even treason. And, the same could be said of Manafort and Flynn and others in the administration, or infiltration, I think, in the case of Flynn. And I could see nothing happening in terms of actual punishment, because the people who are in place to put some sort of sentence or some sort of repercussions are people like Jeff Sessions, who are also implicated in it and who seem to have no interest in holding anybody accountable. And you have to remember, people also were not held accountable for war crimes during the Bush era. People were not held accountable after the financial crisis. And so this would not be, the first time in recent history that a bunch of wealthy, powerful men committed a heinous crime and walked away. I do think this is at a level, though, that I've never seen before of corruption, particularly because it involves, a hostile foreign power. And so that changes the game a bit. And I think that public reaction and, the reaction of people, our elected officials or Congress is going to play a role. And so I'm hoping, I keep futilely hoping this, but the GOP really needs to put country before party at this time, because our country will, be altered in a way that I think will ultimately, I know it will not benefit us as a nation, but I don't even think it will benefit them as individuals unless they act now.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the Russians have got on them. I mean, you have no idea how far the Russian influence goes into the Republican Party. In fact, I just saw a story about Dana Rohrabacher that the FBI had warned him that he was being recruited, didn't even know it.
Yeah, he knew it. I mean, Dana Rohrabacher is somebody I've known, not like personally, but I have met him, for like a decade, because I work on Uzbekistan, and he was a big supporter of their dictator. And, he's a notorious supporter of post-Soviet dictators, not just Russia, but, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, countries, where the abuses towards people are so abhorrent that pretty much no one in Congress would back these leaders except for Dana Rohrabacher. So if he was, saying, oh, gee, wow, it looks like the Russians approached me, I mean, he's someone who I think could have possibly been recruited or certainly been like, a useful idiot for the Russians for a very long time. He's definitely not new to this game. And you may recall Trump was flirting with him as Secretary of State, which was a few nightmarish days for me, where I was like, wow, if you really want to confess to the Russians being involved in this thing, making Dana Rohrabacher the Secretary of State kind of clinches that. So maybe that's why he put, Tillerson in his stead, or maybe it was the oil, I don't know. But yeah, Rohrabacher he's no good.
No, all lots of fun, and it seems like all roads lead back to Russia. So last question I've got, because I hear a lot of people, and we've had guests on saying, well, he's suffering from dementia, he's got mental deficiencies, there's those problems. Does it matter if he's or to use the John Kasich frame, he's not crazy, he's just dumb. Does it matter?
No, I mean, it doesn't matter to me, because I don't think that he's actually dumb. I think that he's somebody who's not book smart, because sort of similar to George W. Bush, he's incurious. He's not bothering to learn about the world. I'm sure he doesn't know much about the countries he's visiting beyond, his own business arrangements. But, this is somebody who's been pulling off scams and cons and all sorts of, financial maneuvers, money laundering, Ponzi schemes for 40 years. This is someone who has managed to pick very savvy advisors and lawyers for 40 years, because he knows where he's deficient in terms of being able, to pull this stuff off. So that's actually not a dumb guy. And he's not stupid in terms of PR and media manipulation either. He has his own talents. They're limited and they're awful, but there's certainly no excusing him by saying, this president is just a moron. I mean, first of all, that would be disqualifying, one would think, for office, but I don't think it's true. I think there's different ways of being intelligent, and unfortunately Trump's ability to be intelligent is manifested in the worst ways possible.
It's going to be an interesting couple of months, or at least a couple of months, probably a year or so, before this investigation finds its way anywhere. But I'd love to have you come back and continue to educate and inform us as this goes on.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's always great talking with you. Thanks so much, Sarah. Sarah Kendzior. You want to check out our website? We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Send sarahkendzior.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Time to talk.
Be a lousy scab, or will you be a man? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Donald Trump, the amazing wonderkind of global luxury living, and now our nation's phantasmagoric fast-charging president, is proving to be a legislative magician. In his campaign, Trump's number one promise was that he would, quote, immediately repeal the entirety of Obamacare. Then, hocus pocus and abracadabra, simultaneously replace it with, quote, great health care for a fraction of the price. Wow, that's why his White House media operation calls him President Action, President Impact. But oops, it seems that the amazing Donald has abruptly learned that what magicians do is not magic, they just perform illusions. In other words, it's fakery. So Trump is now caught in the spotlight of reality, unable to produce a workable plan to repeal and replace Obamacare as he had so glibly promised. In fact, the GOP replacement scheme he's been backing would leave millions of people with no health care coverage while reducing the benefits and jacking up insurance payments for millions of others. Frustrated, President Action recently whined to a meeting of state governors that nobody knew that health care could be so complicated. Of course, by nobody, he meant that he didn't know. Therefore, no one could have known since he knows everything. But wait, in a truly amazing magical act, the Donald has now pulled a rabbit out of his hat. His new Trump Care plan, he brags, will guarantee that every American will have access to health coverage. Before you erupt in applause, however, notice the trick word he's using. Access. That doesn't mean you'll get coverage, you'll just get access to coverage, if you can afford it. It's the same as promising that everyone will get access to owning a private jet, just like Trump. This is Jim Hightower saying, see, he truly is magical.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Hey, Mr. Tangerine Man, build a wall for me. I'm not that bright and don't know that you're not going to.
Yeah, but I'm sure that they'd be more than happy to pay for his impeachment. I loved that. Not going to pay for the wall, but they'll foot the impeachment bill. Good for them. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Susan Collins evidently yesterday said that the Republicans who are crafting the new health care bill in the Senate, because evidently the House bill is, well, dead on arrival. But the Senate's going to come up with their own plan. 13 men on a committee. They're going to produce the Republican version in the Senate. And she's saying, look, you can't produce a partisan bill. In fact, you can't produce one without a woman on it. Hey, here I am, which she was excluded from. She's now working with some centrist Democrats, some moderate Republicans to craft something that, well, might be better than the Affordable Care Act, in her words. Wants to build on it, make the coverage better, and I'm in favor of that. This idea that we're going to scrap the whole thing and start over from scratch, and with all of these, I hate using conservative, with these radical ideas, because honestly and truthfully, I do have respect for true, honest conservatives. But what we see today are just radicals. This idea that, sorry, Granny, no health care for you. We're going to cut money from Medicaid. We're going to slash social programs. We're going to make people with pre-existing conditions pay premiums that they're never going to be able to afford. It's insane. And the kind of ageism that's being thrown around there as well. I guess it is who they are. And the question is when do we say enough is enough? That becomes the question. So good on Susan Collins. She's been kind of one of the sane ones in the Republican Party, along with the independent Angus King. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of the Senate. The House evidently going to have to re-vote to make a bill for the Senate. And there's some who are saying it's not going to even pass there. So maybe Obamacare not dead just yet, although they've put it on life support because of all of the horrible things they've already done. Just makes you nuts. Anyway, going to take a quick break. Right back with Talk Media News. Stick around.
And take money. All they want to do is add up and take your money. All they want to do is add up and take your money. All they want to do is add up and take your money.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. That was the day 31 dock workers were killed and hundreds more were injured in an explosion at the Raritan River Port in South Amboy, New Jersey. Workers were loading ammunition from freight trains onto ships. The freight's ultimate destination was Pakistan. Practically every structure in South Amboy suffered some form of serious or structural damage, with windows blown out everywhere and debris reported as far as 25 miles away. 5,800 more unexploded anti-personnel mines had been strewn about the port. Demolition experts had to be called in for removal. A subsequent fire at a nearby agricultural phosphorus plant complicated their work. The blast was caused by the detonation of 150 tons of military explosives and gelatin dynamite. The piers, equipment, and railroad cars were all demolished. Over a dozen nearby barges were either on fire or sank. Emergency operations went into effect and a state of emergency was declared. Key industries in the immediate area were seriously damaged, including the International Smelting and Refining Company, Pennsylvania Railroad maintenance shops, and the power plant for New Jersey Power and Light. According to a report by the National Board of Fire Underwriters and the Fire Insurance Rating Organization of New Jersey, packing of the mines and fuses by the Kilgore Company was not in accordance with Army standards, and labeling was confusing. The shipped mines were labeled as M1A1, though all parts but the detonator were identical to M1 mines, discontinued by the Army in 1942 for their apparent defective fuse, leading to accidental firing and explosions. The report refrained from drawing a certain cause or assigning blame. Instead, the underwriters offered a number of possible scenarios and recommendations for best practices to be implemented. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Consensus is a toddler on an international flight. The general consensus is Trump or toddler. I think everybody would want to be on with a toddler. At least the toddler understands the word no. So there you go. Good stuff. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So the president is going overseas. And the fun, the hilarity, the gaffes. Let's just hope the next war does not break out. Anyway, here to talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world, Michael Esker, Talk Media News. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. So the president is leaving the country.
Spreading joy wherever he goes.
Are you looking forward to the speech on Islam as much as I am?
Nearly as much as the world of Islam is looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the trip to Israel because remember when he met with the two Russians and spilled the intelligence secrets to them, they were secrets given to the United States by Israel. You can imagine how Benjamin Netanyahu feels and what an atmosphere there might be in the room when Donald Trump sits down with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu, using every bit of emotional strength that he has, refrains from saying to Donald Trump, "What in the world were you thinking when you took information that we gave to you in secret as an ally and you passed it on to our adversaries, the Russians?" I can't imagine how uncomfortable that meeting is going to be.
Or does it even happen? I mean, does that even come up? I mean,
well, that's the thing. He may not bring it up because, Israel needs America at least as much as America needs Israel.
I mean, it's. Is this the right time for him to be doing this, do you think? Because I'm of the mindset him getting out of the country is probably not a bad thing for him, but I don't know about the globe if it's such a good thing.
It reminds me very much of the 1970s when Richard Nixon went to China. It was a historic meeting. It opened the door to China, and it was really a glorious breakthrough. But then Nixon had to return home where Watergate was waiting for him.
Right.
And Trump knows that however long he may be out of the country. Whatever he may say overseas, whatever he may get accomplished over there, if anything, he's going to come home and he's got these investigations that are going on all over the place. He's got these allegations that are dripping out day by day like droplets of blood, and he can't keep from contradicting himself. Now we've got this friend of Jim Comey's, some fella named Benjamin Wittes, who doesn't want to be an anonymous source. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he has come forward and said that Donald Trump's intentions toward Jim Comey made Comey so uncomfortable with this talk of dropping the Mike Flynn investigation that Comey was, as Wittes put it, very uncomfortable and completely disgusted with Donald Trump. You can bet that for this fellow, Benjamin Wittes, to come forward, you can bet that he ran this past Jim Comey first, and that this is a tip-off that Comey himself can't wait to sit down in front of an investigating committee and television cameras and say what he has been saying in memos that have been circulated among his aides, and that is that Donald Trump leaned on him not to investigate Mike Flynn. And if you follow the timeline, Mike Flynn was fired, and the next day, Trump called Comey to the White House and said, I really think you should drop this investigation. Well, timing is everything. You know, at one point, maybe he could have made the argument, hey, I need you to drop this thing because Mike Flynn is so important to my administration, and he brings such insight, such knowledge, such texture that I can't do without him. Well, he had fired him the day before, so he can't make that argument.
Right.
On what grounds does he say to Comey, I need you to drop this thing, other than, hey, he's a good guy? Well, it makes it look as if there's something suspicious going on, even if there isn't anything.
You got to wonder, because there are reports coming out that he's still texting Flynn, and you go, really? It just seems like, wouldn't you stop at some point?
It makes you wonder if he's saying, don't forget, I'm your friend if it comes down to the crunch.
Yeah.
So, look, we are in a mood in this country that has become very divided. We see it on Capitol Hill. We see it on both sides of the aisle. And I might add, and I think maybe if we could take a moment to talk about this, we see it reflected over the past couple of decades with a man who died yesterday, Roger Ailes.
Right.
This is a guy who set off much of the political contentiousness in this country, not just with the creation of Fox News, which seems to me to live in a parallel universe to our own. But let's remember, this is the guy who helped bring us, nearly half a century ago, who helped bring us Richard Nixon. Do you remember there was a famous book written by Joe McGinnis called The Selling of the President? And Roger Ailes was a key figure in this. It was about how they packaged Richard Nixon like a box of soap flakes with all the Madison Avenue kind of stuff that you would use to market and advertise any piece of merchandise. It was Ailes who came up with these half-hour television programs that were supposed to be town meetings where they would question Richard Nixon about issues, but the meetings were stacked with Nixon insiders, and the questions were loaded in advance so that he would know how to answer them. nobody knew it at the time. And it was the beginning of packaging politicians as though they were just any other kind of piece of merchandise. He brought us Richard Nixon, who brought us Watergate, and later Roger Ailes also brought us Fox News, which has become, in my mind, one of the truly divisive media in the country.
Yeah, no question. No question. What his fingerprints on this country and his time on this earth was, in my view, destructive to our country.
I agree 100%. And but what Roger Ailes did was tap into a vein of disaffection in this country that is, in many ways, the same vein that Donald Trump tapped into. And of course, they were holding hands through the whole election.
Yeah. You look at where we are and where we're going, and you can see the whole roadmap when you look back. And I often bring up the Powell memo, and the call of the billionaire class to fund media outlets and writers and newspapers and all these think tanks and these different astroturf groups. And you look at just read that Powell memo and look backwards and go, man, mission accomplished. They really built exactly what they set out to build, which is an echo chamber for their alternative reality.
They sure did, and Roger Ailes did all of this, of course, with the guiding hand of Rupert Murdoch behind him. Murdoch supplying the money, Ailes supplying the political point of view, and it's we don't need to go very much into his personal life, which included having to pay out millions of dollars in legal settlements to women who said that they were sexually harassed by him, and led to him having to leave Fox in utter disgrace.
Now, so what do you think of the rumor that Jason Chaffetz is going to be resigning at the end of next month and is probably heading to Fox News?
That I had not heard, but he would certainly fit in there, wouldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I said. I mean, the alternative universe that they live in, he would, because he's kind of a slimy character in my view anyway, would fit right in there with that Kilmeade guy. They look like brothers.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how Fox does without Ailes' guiding hand and without Bill O'Reilly's vitriol spilling out every night. There was a story the other day in the New York Times that Fox has sent out word to its stockholders not to get their hopes too high over the coming quarter because they are anticipating lower ratings. So we will see if that holds true.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you replaced O'Reilly with Tucker, really?
Yeah, another good one.
I mean, at least O'Reilly you could actually watch because even if you disagreed with him, he was at least somewhat you were able to follow and he kept your attention. Tucker Carlson just makes me go, please, next.
I don't know. When I watched O'Reilly, I felt as if I was growing a tumor.
Yeah, I mean, but you the blood boiling and he kept your attention at least. And look, I used to watch him at the gym and all of that, just for that. But Tucker, there's just nothing there.
No.
Nothing at all. Anyway, last bit. Big hearings with the Deputy Attorney General. Anything coming out of that today?
Well, he has said to them, Rosenstein, he told them yesterday that he knew when he wrote the memo that the decision had already been made to fire Comey. And that, of course, flies directly into the first line of defense that we heard from the White House, that Comey had been fired essentially because of Rosenstein's memo,
yeah.
which Trump later contradicted that same day, but not until all of these White House assistants, including Pence, had been running around claiming it was, blaming Rosenstein or crediting him, the memo, for being the reason that they had fired Comey.
Yeah,
They
it's
can't get
just
out
crazy.
of their own way. They can't get their stories straight.
Nope, it's just crazy, Mike. I appreciate the time. Great talking with you.
All right, man. Talk to you.
Our good friend Mike Olesker. Talk Media News. Quick break. Congressman Boyle going to be here. Stick around.
radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, you look at this whole timeline, and, the reality, you got Rosenstein saying now that, I already knew Trump was going to fire Comey. I wrote the memo, was asked to. You've got Trump saying that even after all of this timeline, this shifting, this back and forth, all of this up and down, back and forth, it just seems that nobody in this administration is capable of getting their story straight, or even knowing what the story is. And that's one of those things that just makes you kind of shake your head and go, is it just pure incompetence? Is it the inability to tell the truth? Is it just the lack of concern of optics? Where does all of this stuff take us? And, the more I look at this administration, and, I had someone said, if someone tweeted to me, well, you're dumb if you don't think Donald Trump is dumb. I don't think he's a dumb guy. I think, as Sarah Kendzior put it, he's incurious. It's not something he's interested in. And I think of the old Neil Young line. It doesn't mean that much to me to mean that much to you. I think that's Trump's view. He doesn't care about anyone but himself. And when you look at the reality in all of this, and you look at the timeline and the insanity that's going on, you got to start questioning, just basic sanity. Now, as I understand, today, big hearing in the House, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein answering some questions pretty much as we speak right now, which is why I've asked Congressman Brendan Boyle to come talk with us. Congressman, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, between listening anymore to Rosenstein and talking to you, I made my choice to talk to you because I think that this will be more beneficial.
Yeah, I can't imagine he's saying anything more than what he said yesterday, which was basically nothing.
Well, so I obviously have to be careful here because it was a classified briefing. So there's certain, can't go into details. But I would say that I wish I could have the last hour of my life back because, frankly, I learned precious little, except to say that there were a few questions raised by my colleagues that I think Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein could have been able to answer, should have answered, had he been willing, but unfortunately in each case he declined. And I think that is highly unfortunate. But I would say, though, that I do have real confidence in the fact that we now have a special prosecutor in Robert Mueller who has completely free reign on this matter. He's someone who served in the Obama administration, the Bush administration, someone with a stellar career, was not in any way a Trump loyalist. So I, for the first time in a while, I do have optimism and confidence that we will finally get to the bottom of this matter.
Yeah, that's the hope. You've been saying for a while, though, I've been following you on Twitter, and you've been saying for a while we need this, and you need the Republicans to step forward and hold this administration accountable and to say in public the things that they've been saying in private. Are you seeing them finally coming forward, or is it still, everyone's still a little jittery?
Well, I appreciate that. As you know, in following me on Twitter, I've been saying for months, in fact, I think I was one of the earliest to come out and call for a special prosecutor. I did that, I believe, back either February 28th or March 1st. I believe, I thought that it was warranted well before this. You have seen in the last week or so some more of my Republican colleagues moving in that direction. But even with that, before Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein announced a couple days ago that there would be a special prosecutor, you had precious few Republicans, especially in the House, calling for that or calling for an independent commission. You had a lot of them saying it privately. You would have quite an increasing number saying that they were quote-unquote concerned or disturbed, and yet then they wouldn't go the extra length and actually challenge this administration. So unfortunately, there's been a real lack of leadership on the House Republican side specifically, a real lack of putting country ahead of party. I can tell you that a lot of them, frankly, are relieved that a special prosecutor has been appointed, but it wouldn't have happened if it was up to them.
Right, but here's the thing: I'm in favor of the special prosecutor. My fear is that everything now gets stopped. That any information that we would find out as the public now gets holed up because everyone can say, "Well, the special prosecutor is doing it." Are you in the House pushing for a House investigation so that we can see this stuff, so that we know why he fired Comey? We know we get something of an accurate timeline instead of this insane kind of who knows what happened when. And honestly, do we ever get to the bottom of was there collusion with the Trump administration and the Russians?
Well, all of that is supposed to be part now of this investigation of the special prosecutor, which my understanding is does not all of a sudden start anew, but really continues and builds off of the work of the FBI, which has apparently been going on beginning last July. So I do have confidence now that, and like I said, I've not had confidence or optimism for quite a while in this matter, but with the appointment of special prosecutor, I do. I also want to make one other point that's important. Just because there is the Mueller-led special prosecutor investigation that the FBI directly reports to now, that doesn't mean that the congressional investigations should stop. If you take a look at Watergate, for example, or even Iran-Contra, the congressional hearings and the congressional investigations ran concurrently. Again, Watergate's a great example. You had special prosecutor, you had Archibald Cox. After Cox was fired, you had his successor, Leon Jaworski. While that was going on, you still had the House hearings, you still had the Senate hearings, both of which, it was right before I was born, both of which we know from history really transfixed the country and captured its attention. The same exact playbook could and should be followed here, where those House and Senate investigations continue and the hearings continue.
Now, you sitting on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, is that part of what your committee would look at?
Well, on the Foreign Affairs Committee, we really have not had a direct role in this thus far, mostly because this is an intelligence matter. So the Intelligence Committee has really been the one.
Okay, because I mean, you're leaking secrets that the Israelis gave to us that ended up with the Russians. I mean, that's obviously an intelligence thing, but I would argue as well as it's got to do with how we deal with other foreign nations.
Oh, I agree. And one challenge for the media and for all of us the last couple of weeks is there's been more news the last 10 days than what you typically see in a year in any normal administration. So as a result of that, Trump has actually been somewhat helped by the appointment of a special prosecutor in that it blocked off the front pages the fact that he completely, stupidly, and dangerously revealed to the Russian foreign minister precious U.S. intelligence that was given to us from a trusted ally. That is a dangerous, not even a rookie mistake, because no other rookie president, Democrat or Republican, ever did that. And I believe, by the way, he did it not for any sort of strategic reason. I think he did it spur of the moment because he likes to brag, because he's a deeply, deeply insecure individual, and he just wanted to prove to the Russians that, in his words, he got such great intelligence, the best intelligence, and then let spill a precious secret that now not only does it affect the relationship we have with that foreign country, country that gave us the information. But it also sends the signal to other allies that, wait a minute, if we continue this cooperative relationship with the United States and release information to them, that's going to get its way up to the President of the United States, and then we just can't trust that it will remain a secret. By the way, I can tell you, and speaking off the record to a number of diplomats with whom I've become familiar over the last few years, they had that concern going into this administration already. And what happened this past week just validated it.
No, I mean, that came up during the campaign. I mean, I remember talking about that because you had, CIA folks and FBI people going, well, there could be a time where we can't tell him classified things out of the fear that he will, not on purpose, just as you pointed out, because he likes to brag, throw it out there.
It goes back to the kind of person Donald Trump is. We've never had to deal with someone like this, and I truly believe, and this is not me saying this because of my politics, which are clearly staunchly on the Democratic side, and I wish I didn't have to say it. I truly believe that when the Founding Fathers were designing the Constitution, and I've read not only every word of the Constitution, every word of the Federalist Papers, the last few months actually reread them because of my renewed interest in this topic. I believe that they designed this system of government, which has plenty of checks and balances and sometimes can be frustrating because it's hard to actually get something done. That said, I think they designed it to protect us from someone exactly like Donald Trump.
I agree. No, I mean, absolutely. And this kind of mob rule that the Republicans have right now. So let me ask you this, because, while we're focused on the shiny thing and as crazy and as insane as the whole White House has been, there's really some ugly policy that's going through. I look at the assault, the repeal and replace nonsense. I look at the assault on overtime, on worker protections, on all of this stuff. There's still the ugliness happening. We're just not seeing it, I don't think.
Right. And that's a very good point. And, because of the events of the last 2 weeks or the last 10 days, it distracts from the fact that on this day 2 weeks ago, this House was voting on and passing their repeal and replace plan, what I call Trump Care. It's really the first time in American history that the Congress of the United States, or one of the two chambers of the Congress, voted to take away a benefit as massive as the Affordable Care Act, as massive as Obamacare. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan CBO, led by a Republican appointee, it would take away health care from 24 million Americans. Never before, whether Social Security, Medicare, any benefit that had come into existence in this country, never even faced a vote to take it away after it was passed and enshrined into law and became a functioning program. So it shows you where the Republican values are, that as much as they talk about morality and as much as they talk about being for the working class, it's complete nonsense. It's a fraud. And just look at that vote for Trump Care that would do more to harm the working poor in this country than any other bill that's ever been passed.
Yeah. And you look at the massive tax handout that we're giving. I mean, you can say what you want about it. It's a huge handout to the wealth class of this country.
That's exactly right. And some have called it wealth care because tucked into that would be a massive tax cut that CEOs in the medical industry and the insurance industry would benefit from. These are folks for whom their average salary is between $11 and $13 million a year.
Just absolutely obscene. And I see the Koch brothers are going to spend millions of dollars between now and the fall to push through Trump's tax plan, which would be an even bigger windfall for them. It's just insane. I know you got to get back to work and you got to get back to the hearings. So my last question is and folks are asking, are you on the impeachment wagon? I mean, are we to the point now where, that's the I word is somewhere on the table?
I want to draw a distinction here between what my prediction is and what I'm calling for at this moment, because it's important. First, if you mentioned that you follow me on Twitter, and I follow you as well, Rick, you know then that I have predicted that my honest opinion, knowing what has already been made public, I do believe that this is ultimately going to lead to impeachment. I find it very hard to believe that Comey just made up that Donald Trump 3 times asked him to close the Michael Flynn criminal investigation, looking into Flynn's direct financial ties from the Russian government. And we already know, it's been reported and documented, he accepted millions of dollars from the Russian government. So, based on what has already been publicly reported, unless all of that is untrue, and Comey is making this up, and the documentary evidence linking Flynn to RT and the Russian government's untrue, and that would be extremely difficult to believe. So I think we are going to get to impeachment. I think that Trump has, at the very least, obstructed justice, which, by the way, was the first article of impeachment against both President Nixon and President Clinton when we last 2 times we visited impeachment. That said, am I right now at this moment calling for impeachment? No, because we're not there yet. I believe we will get there, as I clearly showed. However, we need to make sure that we have a legitimate process. If the other side is paying lip service to the rule of law, our side needs to make sure that we're faithful to it.
Right.
We're going to have the congressional investigations. They need to move more quickly than they have been, by the way. It's unfortunate that they've been obstructed by Republican delay tactics. We're now having the Office of the Special Prosecutor and its investigation. I have no doubt that Robert Mueller is going to find exactly what has been reported. When he is able to present that evidence, I believe it'll be devastating to this administration. And so I'm not calling for it today, but if you ask me, I have to place my hard-earned money on which way this is going to go. Sadly, I do think we're going to now be faced for one of the few times in American history with the impeachment of a U.S. president, and it's because of the actions of Donald Trump.
And to me, it doesn't matter if it's incompetence or stupidity. It still is what it is. Congressman, I appreciate the time. I'd love to have you back on early and often.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Back to work. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happy!
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
You listen to Congressman Boyle there, and he's right on the Russia stuff, on the Trump stuff, spot on. That's why I follow him. I think he's one of our better congressmen. But on the healthcare part, it's really a massive tax handout, as he points out. And you look at the news of, you're talking about $800 billion in cuts to Medicaid programs, to social safety net programs that help, we the working people. And where's that money going? Well, you want to talk about redistribution of wealth? There it goes upward. Here to talk a little bit about that. And, the whole, evidently Donald Trump discovered priming the pump. I've got our good friend Mateus Vernango, professor of economics at Bucknell University. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So you've got the Donald who's now saying that he invented, priming the pump while simultaneously wanting to cut $800 billion from working class programs.
Yeah, that's the sad part. I think that, he probably doesn't understand the concept that he supposedly invented. So, he doesn't seem very, very keen on actually delivering on growth. As you said, he seems very, very keen on enacting policies that are redistributive. So he's going to cut taxes, not just through Medicaid, but if these plans go through, they're all through. They're basically a huge bonus for the very wealthy. And then at the same time, he goes on the other end and cuts spending. As you said, the cuts are even worse than what we had, because of all of those agreements to restrict the size of the deficit during Obama that were done by Republicans in Congress. That are even more stringent, and so he's going to cut basically welfare. It's the Republican notion that welfare and people on welfare deserve to be in poverty. So he's going to cut temporary assistance for needy families and all sorts of welfare programs. And the other reason, by the way, he says that he's going to do that while maintaining relatively balanced budget over a period of 10 years, and that only happens because he has very unrealistic sort of growth estimates. So things don't look necessarily good. I think we're going to look at worsening of income distribution and harder sort of situation for working class people. Lots of the people that in places like Pennsylvania actually did vote for him, hoping for better jobs and so on and so forth, and higher growth.
And all they're going to end up with is, massive cuts to programs that they benefited from. And I look at this and you go, when you're cutting almost $1 trillion from programs over the next decade, how do you expect the economy and those jobs and those things to help? And while simultaneously going, we're going to give that money to the wealthy who will then invest it overseas and not bring it back and pay taxes on it here. It just seems like more of the same, only worse.
It's because he's actually, his theories are not, about pumping the prime and not particularly Keynesian. So pumping the prime would be the notion that what will drive growth will be, demand. That he has to expand demand, he has to give money in the pockets of people, and while the people don't have enough money, he would have to, the government, go out and do stuff like, infrastructure spending and whatnot. So he on one level he has talked about stuff like that, on one level, because he's never forced say things like increasing minimum wages and that's the way of putting money in the pockets of people and supporting unions and so on and so forth. But fair enough. But he has talked about the infrastructure, but that's not in the budget, so it's not to be seen yet. So what he would suggest that would have growth is part of the very anti-Keynesian set of demand-driven sort of story. It's a supply side story that we do know that it's fantasy. It's voodoo economics. So and he certainly didn't invent that. That's Reaganomics. So Trumponomics is basically the same of Reagan. It's more cut. The notion is that Mnuchin and his Treasury Secretary has repeated that is the idea that cutting taxes for the very wealthy will lead to investment. This is just. If I can use his term for that, sad. It's not going to happen. We know that it's not going to happen. So there's no evidence for that, and then there's no reason to believe that will happen. The other, supposedly, I think they might say also that renegotiating trade deals might bring some manufacturing jobs and growth. And I, although I'm sympathetic to that idea, if they actually go ahead and do more than most economists, I should say, on that. I'm a bit skeptical about whether that would be enough to bring the jobs without significant improvement in spending and infrastructure and higher minimum wages. In my view, the important thing of rethinking trade and the trade deals that we've done is that it will strengthen. Trade deals always favor certain groups against others. So So American corporations that could export jobs and export, say, to Mexico corn from the Midwest and whatnot did very well. But workers in the Rust Belt, lost, and that took away bargaining power. So what trade deals may do is that they may bring back some bargaining power to the table for workers and for unions that, together with infrastructure spending, higher wages, and whatnot, may lead to a recomposition of the middle class. But all the other policies he has in place go against that. So I really don't see Trumponomics as being coherent or feasible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scattershot of, and those of us who want him to succeed on certain things like infrastructure look at his plan and go, well, this is basically a ripoff of taxpayers. This is payday lending for infrastructure. It's not good.
Yeah, that's exactly it. When you scratch a little bit under the surface, it's glitter. It's not real gold, and it's just a facade, with the big Trump thing on front. But it's cheap and it's also incoherent, and so it's part of the, I would say, the general sort of theme of his presidency, of improvisation and not planning ahead things and outbursts, but that at the end of the day are thought for the very wealthy, for the class that he was, that he belongs to. That's essentially it. And I would say it's not even a class thing. It's surprising, but it's somewhat like a third world kleptocracy. It's essentially, I mean, if I had to say what's the thing that I'm more concerned about, the problems that might lead to an impeachment, it's not really Russiagate, I would say. The thing that I think they're already clearly there, it's the emoluments clauses, the fact that he's getting money, his business, he hasn't separated himself from his businesses, and he's getting money from foreign government and so on and so forth. And not that, politically what will happen is for me an incognita, but my point is he's benefiting himself. So this is what it's all about. It's about income distribution. His policies are all about income distribution, and what we should expect. This is an assault on workers, and so I don't see this as a necessarily a good outcome in the near future. So the economy will continue, if we're lucky, it will continue in this sort of slow path of growth.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we haven't even heard really anything about over the last couple of months, is his businesses and his business ties. And together, again, another reason why I've been calling for the tax returns. But we're all focused on Comey and on the Russians and on the leaking and all of that stuff. The money, and this is what I keep going back to. While we're focused on this stuff, the shiny stuff over here, we're being robbed blind, not just with him and his businesses, but you name the different departments and the giveaways that we're giving to big business. Taxpayers are getting screwed over hugely, to use a Trump word.
Exactly. No, I think you're right. I think that all of this stuff about Russiagate has sort of they have, to some extent, I'm not sure wisely or not, but they also had sort of fueled this sort of discussion. He has fueled it certainly through Twitter, and has not, and Comey and all of those things, and that has been instrumental for all sorts of other things that have been going on the economic front that are, I think, long term much worse. And as I said, they hinge on this question of what kind of country we want in terms of income distribution, whether it's still possible to have, whether one believes in that or not, an American dream, that you can sort of go up the ladder and improve yourself, and that that society, you have a shot. I don't think that's at this point, clear that you do in American society, and and it's part of why he's there. But I think that he's certainly betraying that. Whoever voted him because he's a populist is being betrayed, will be betrayed by his president.
Yeah, and the thing is, we knew that from the beginning. So let me ask you a last question then, because back to this priming the pump, and I when he said it and he discovered it, I was wondering which pump he was talking about. Maybe the small hands pump he needs. But explain what priming the pump is, so that maybe folks might not know. Explain what you mean by it when we talk about priming the pump and why we're in favor of it.
So the notion, as far as I can tell, it goes back to the 30s. And it is essentially the quintessential Keynesian idea that that you need to go and spend. You have to sort of crank. I think I'm certainly not from agricultural area, so I cannot. The analogy was stated to you have to do the hard work of priming the pump to get the water. So what the idea was to stimulate the economy, and so pumping the prime here could be seen as simply the big investment in infrastructure, an old New Deal sort of Keynesian idea, and that's the era from when this sort of was sort of used regularly. It doesn't seem to be something that, as you said, when you look at all of these private public partnerships and ways of scheming, public money out to his friends when he talks about it, and so I don't see any of that coming out of his budget, and that's concerning. That's concerning.
I'm with you, Mateus. I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Our
good friend, Mateus Vernengo, professor of economics there at Bucknell University. You should follow him on Twitter. Outstanding stuff. Naked Keynesianism right there. We got links at thericksmithshow.com of how you can follow him. Great stuff. But again, you go back to priming the pump. Maybe we should have asked, I don't know, which pump he was talking about. Just a question. Let's quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Donald Trump, the amazing wonderkind of global luxury living, and now our nation's phantasmagoric fast-charging president, is proving to be a legislative magician. In his campaign, Trump's #1 promise was that he would, quote, immediately repeal the entirety of Obamacare. Then, hocus pocus and abracadabra, simultaneously replace it with, quote, great health care for a fraction of the price. Wow, that's why his White House media operation calls him President Action, President Impact. But oops, it seems that the amazing Donald has abruptly learned that what magicians do is not magic, they just perform illusions. In other words, it's fakery. So Trump is now caught in the spotlight of reality, unable to produce a workable plan to repeal and replace Obamacare as he had so glibly promised. In fact, the GOP replacement scheme he's been backing would leave millions of people with no health care coverage while reducing the benefits and jacking up insurance payments for millions of others. Frustrated, President Action recently whined to a meeting of state governors that nobody knew that health care could be so complicated. Of course, by nobody, he meant that he didn't know. Therefore, no one could have known since he knows everything. But wait, in a truly amazing magical act, the Donald has now pulled a rabbit out of his hat. His new Trump Care plan, he brags, will guarantee that every American will have access to health coverage. Before you erupt in applause, however, notice the trick word he's using. Access. That doesn't mean you'll get coverage, you'll just get access to coverage, if you can afford it. It's the same as promising that everyone will get access to owning a private jet, just like Trump. This is Jim Hightower saying, see, he truly is magical.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
You gotta got Mateus there saying, oh, no, it's not going to be the Russian stuff that gets him. It's going to be the emoluments clause. It's going to be how much money his businesses are raking in off of the Donald in office, how much Ivanka and Eric and the rest of them are cashing in on the name. Interesting. You had Congressman Boyle earlier saying that he thinks an impeachment is inevitable. Interesting times. But now we've got the president abroad. The bar, I don't even know that there's a bar. I don't think that they've even bothered to bring out the bar. They're just going to, if he doesn't trip over himself and doesn't start World War III, it will be a success. And you'll have pundits saying, no, he is presidential. Sad times we live in. Anyway, here to talk about what's going on and, maybe what kind of craziness we're seeing. Our good friend Isaiah Poole. He's the communication director there at People's Action. Isaiah, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure.
So, we're seeing all of this insanity. We're seeing all of this craziness, but fortunately, we're seeing a lot of organizing. And on June 3rd, the March for Truth all across the country. I know you guys are planning the People's Summit. There's a lot of organizing and a lot of stuff happening.
Tremendous amount of organizing happening. Also, there is the Resistance Summer where Move On, People's Action, and a number of other organizations will be organizing a series of events that will carry through the August recess. So if Donald Trump thinks that he's going to enter a period where, we are exhausted and, to be honest, we kind of are exhausted, but we're not going to stop.
No, at this point you can't. But, this week in particular, this has been an exhausting week where the flips, the flops, the turns, this is the kind of a week that, even the most outrageous, coked up soap opera writer couldn't dream up.
That's true. I mean, and of course, we had the last week we had the flip flop on the Comey firing and the absolute embarrassment of the White House communications team when Donald Trump said what was kind of obvious, which is that he had already made up his mind to fire Comey. It didn't matter what this report by Rosenstein was going to say, and in fact, Rosenstein himself admitted this week, the assistant FBI director, that when I wrote that memo, I knew that Donald Trump was going to fire Comey anyway. So I just wrote this thing, I guess, just to satisfy Trump.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, why write it? I mean, if you already know the outcome, you already know, why? I mean, at this point, it's happening. Why throw yourself in the middle of that jackpot, knowing that Trump's probably going to throw you under the bus, which is exactly what he did?
Well, this is one of the questions. There's an op-ed in the Washington Post by a scholar at Brookings, whose name I will come up with in a moment. But it was, the question that it raised was there's a point at which you have to move from joining an administration like the Trump administration because you think you can do some good amid the madness, but then realizing that no, you're not doing good in the middle of the madness. You're actually an enabler. And you have to now make a judgment about whether you're, about getting out and saving the country and saving what's left of your reputation.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing all those reports right now that you've got a lot of people who are looking for the exits, a lot of people lawyering up, and the rats are scurrying off the ship.
That's true. It's interesting that we now have reports that Sean Spicer may be moving toward it can't be a graceful exit, but it will be an exit. I think Reince Priebus really looks horrible in this because we now have reports that he approached Comey, James Comey, the former FBI director, and asked Comey to make public statements that would exonerate Trump and the Trump administration. in terms of the investigation of Russia. Highly improper behavior, which should get him, which would in a normal environment would have been enough of a political storm that he would have had to leave. Of course, in this environment, the bar has been lowered so low that we're not even paying a lot of attention to that fact.
Yeah, you got to wonder. I mean, with all of these stories that are coming out now, and look, there are going to be many more coming in the weeks and months ahead. You got to wonder how many of these people end up being indicted. I mean, the Reagan administration is going to look like choir boys by the time they're done here.
And even the Nixon administration will, because we're talking about incredible levels of misbehavior. I don't know at the end of the day, what the toll is going to be in terms of, who is censured, who is indicted. Certainly, Michael Flynn has done things that are unconscionable, and the way that the administration actually continues. We had the reports this week that Trump has been calling Michael Flynn up and saying, "Be strong." There was a hint that Trump has offered to bring him back into the administration in some capacity once all of the what Trump calls the witch hunt is over. I mean, I've never seen anything like this, and I've been around a lot longer than I care to admit, and I've never seen anything like it. We're in uncharted territory as far as I'm concerned, and I am as amazed that we are, that we're in this.
I think a lot of us are. I mean, look, I go back to during the campaign, and I was predicting, Armageddon. I was saying that this is going to be the most inept administration in history. They were going to rob us blind. It was going to be a massive theft of tax dollars. It was going to be all kinds of chaos. There'd be firings. There'd be all of this stuff. I was saying this back then. To be honest, I was understated. It's been worse than I could have imagined.
Much worse. If there's any solace in this, is that it is what we have right now is that his legislative agenda, such as it is in tatters right now. They're going to try to move health care. I just got off a call, and one of the things that I've heard, which we're going to actually dig into, is the idea that the House may have to do another vote on health care after the Congressional Budget Office score on the health care bill comes up.
So they can maybe use the Budget Reconciliation Act to slip it through the Senate.
Exactly. But the CBO score says that bill that the House passed a couple of weeks ago doesn't qualify for reconciliation. Then they'll have to do things to the bill to make it pass muster in the Senate.
Well, what do you think to this story? Because it just came out the other day that you have Cruz and Paul saying that they can bypass the Senate parliamentarian and end up having Pence say that it does qualify, thus giving them the ability to pass it with just 50 votes.
Republicans believe in the rule of law except when they don't.
There is that.
So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Senate, Senate Republicans have shown the capacity, and we saw this in the Supreme Court vote, that if they want to disrespect Senate tradition in order to score a political win, they will do that.
Democracy be damned. Last bit of
Right.
questioning I've got for you, though, because you guys have got you're part of a group putting up the People Summit June 9th through the 11th in Chicago. Tell me, what's this about? What are you doing?
Well, this is going to be a powerful combination of organizations on the left flank of American politics and organizations who are leading the resistance against Donald Trump, but not just Donald Trump. But this is also the resistance to the corporatization of the Democratic Party. Because what we have to do is I had a great conversation with our director of movement politics, Ryan Greenwood, this week. And his point is that we can't just make it about Donald Trump, because if you remember the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton had a very effective argument against Donald Trump, and it didn't work. Why? Because there wasn't a sense in Hillary Clinton's message, at least in terms of a lot of people, certainly in your neck of the woods, Rick, and in other areas around outside of the liberal bubbles.
Yeah, I'm curious. What was the effective message? Because I must have missed it.
Well, but that's my point. Well, I would say that the argument that she made against Donald Trump
the argument that she made is that he's a horrible guy because of the Billy Bush tapes, grabbing her by the you-know-whats. That's all I heard. Their ads, or at least where I live, was just inundating the last 3 weeks of the campaign with those ads and how do you want such a horrible person? I don't remember her having really an economic message. But tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, that's my point. That there wasn't a strong economic message.
Okay.
There wasn't a strong, how are we going to get the country and the country's economy and the country's democracy out of the hands of the bankers and the corporatists and the other folks that Donald Trump was saying, well, he's going to go in and clean the swamp, and then it turns out they actually just brought more alligators. But what people didn't hear that Hillary Clinton was, as far as they knew, Hillary Clinton was going to just bring her own set of alligators to the swamp. And what we have to do is, at the People Summit, we are going to say we are the people who actually understand what the swamp is really about. It is about concentrated wealth. It is about a handful of folks who have our democracy by, its private parts, and are not operating in the interests of working people. In fact, are working against the interests of working people. And that we have to rebuild that majority that takes our democracy and puts it back in the hands of the people to which it belongs, and that is all of us.
And look, and pursuing policies that benefit all of us instead of just the 1%. And I think it's a great thing. Mark it on the calendars, June 9th through the 11th in Chicago if you're around. ThePeoplesSummit.org. For folks who can't go, I know you had done some with your last convention, the Rise Up from Protest to Power convention that you guys at People's Action put together. You streamed some of it. Will there be any of that for folks to pay attention to?
Well, what I would encourage people to do is watch peoplesummit.org. That is the main website for where you can get information about the summit. And I do not know for sure if there's going to be live streaming, but I will let you know if there is.
There you go. Good stuff. Isaiah, always great talking with you. Have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
Good talking to our friend Isaiah Poole. Again, you want to check out the summit, thepeoplesummit.org. We'll get links at thericksmithshow.com. Also, you can check out People's Action site as well. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Virginia is now uniquely positioned to become a leader in the effort to reduce carbon emissions and stave off the most dramatic consequences of climate change.
Virginia governor sets up carbon cap and trade system.
What this really is about is taking away public lands from the American people.
Bears Ears National Monument targeted for repeal on behalf of oil and gas industry. EPA gets an earful on which pollution regulations to repeal or not. Plus,
Glacier National Park is slowly losing what it's named after, its famous glaciers.
See it while you still can. National Park glaciers are going.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent grain news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
In fact, I've been, criticized by some of my opponents as saying you've put somebody in charge of the EPA who sued the EPA 13, 14, 15 times. My response to that is they deserved it.
Okay, so what did we do to deserve you, Scott Pruitt? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as the administration and its EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, do whatever they can to abandon the environment, it's being left up to states and state governors to try to save it.
That's absolutely right. Virginia's Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe on Tuesday signed an executive order to create a cap and trade system for the state's power plants. Cap and trade is a market-based mechanism that caps the emissions from power plants and allows them to trade and sell their unused allowances to essentially profit from reducing their emissions. Virginia is grappling with rising sea levels that are already causing nuisance flooding in coastal cities. Governor McAuliffe said since President Trump is rolling back climate policies, states must now take the lead to fight climate change.
Virginia cannot afford to sit idly by as the new administration rolls back common sense policies. The citizens of our Commonwealth want and expect us to confront this issue. That is why we are announcing bold action today.
You know, it's strange. We hear all the time from Republicans that cap and trade legislation will destroy the economy. Odd that the governor of Virginia and the governors of California and elsewhere would want to destroy their own economy.
Funny, it's actually turning out to be a helpful part of the economy in California. Internationally, as the U.S. falls behind because of President Trump's policy reversals, the world's other two largest emitters are making fast gains. According to a new analysis from CarbonTracker.org, China and India, the world's two most populous countries, are making such rapid progress in cutting the growth of their own carbon emissions that they're on track to not only meet but beat their emissions reduction pledges under the United Nations Paris Climate Agreement.
Weird. We were told that would kill the economy, too.
Meanwhile, in Montana, if you want to see Glacier National Park, you should probably go sooner rather than later. A new report from the U.S. Geological Survey says that the glaciers the park is named for are disappearing. Since just the 1960s, the glaciers have shrunk 40% on average. Some have shrunk as much as 85%. Out of about 150 glaciers in the park in the late 1800s, there are now only 26, still big enough to qualify for the name. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's Environmental Protection Agency got quite an earful when it asked for public comment on which pollution regulations to repeal in response to an executive order from President Trump. Turns out people like their clean air and clean water. The Washington Post reports the EPA received more than 55,000 comments, with defenders opposed to rolling back EPA pollution rules, outnumbering industry critics by 73-1.
Wow. So they had opened up a line to ask people what we should do away with, what rules, what regulations we should do away with. And everyone called and said, keep them? Keep the regulations in place?
That's right.
Wow.
The EPA comment docket is now closed, but the Interior Department is now taking public comments on which of your national monuments you'd like to keep. A Trump executive order directs Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke to recommend recently designated monuments for repeal. You can tell him what you think at regulations.gov. One of the monuments targeted for repeal by the oil and gas industry is the new Bears Ears National Monument in Utah. Bears Ears was protected by President Obama back in December after a years-long effort by Native American tribes trying to protect their ancestral lands from rampant looting. Utah's state and federal lawmakers are lobbying to strip Bears Ears of protected status. Attorney Matt Campbell of the Native American Rights Fund said on a recent broadcast, it's a blatant attempt to open Bears Ears to mining, drilling, and fracking.
What this really is about is taking away public lands from the American people to free them up for resource exploitation. And the tribes view this area as very important. There's hundreds of thousands of artifacts and archaeological sites and landmarks and objects of historic and scientific interest within all the regions of Bears Ears.
The Interior Department has purposely made the Bears Ears public comment period very short. You can make your voice heard, again, by leaving a comment at regulations.gov.
Where?
Regulations.gov.
Got it. For all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? It'd be a paradise to put up a fucking line. They took all the trees and put them in a tree museum.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
People all over this world are getting organized to bow to you fascists goodbye.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Flammable ice. That's going to be the next big thing in the public eye. What is flammable ice? Well, it's just frozen water and gas. And if you wonder why that's important, well, evidently the Chinese have figured out how to get at the flammable ice, which, again, you wonder why all the fighting over the South China Sea. We now find out that there is a deposit of energy that is supposed to be enormous, that if you can figure out how to get through the ice to get the flammable ice, that you could be energy independent for 100 years. Problem is well, you can kiss all of your ice goodbye, and I guess help make that warming a little bit faster. Now what they haven't figured out how to get through the bottom of the permafrost as without causing so much damage, and they're still getting there, but evidently the Chinese have figured out the first step in it. But again, you wonder why there's this kind of fighting. Because you've got it's right there between China, Vietnam, the Philippines, right there in the Chinese Sea. A little bit of battling going on, and you wonder, will we have the same kind of I don't know, thought that Eisenhower had to send the Pacific Fleet over there? It's going to be interesting. Anyway, lots of good stuff this week. Kind of take a break. It has been a news week, I think, like none other. I say on Saturday, everyone needs to take a breath, go out, play with the kids, cut the grass, paint a fence, do something other than look at Donald Trump. That's what I'm doing. Saturday is going to be a no Trump day. That simple. And then get ready and energize, have the rest on Sunday and come back Monday ready to take on what, will certainly be an interesting weekend of news, thanks to the Donald being overseas. I'm personally waiting for the big speech. I think it will be entertaining, if nothing else. And, who knows? Maybe we can sell some arms and get some gas and do some other things along with it. Anyway, if you've missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, Saturday, 7 p.m., The Rick Smith Show, Free Speech TV. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide of flood beneath the lunar